Welcome back, race fans, to Off the Track podcast, where you get the dirt. I'm Levi Godsey, and as always, we are here at Blue Chip Technologies Racing Engines. We are a high-performance race engine shop located right here in Heltonville, Indiana, and today we have joining us on the show, Chad Taylor.
Hey, Levi.
Thanks for joining us, Chad.
Thanks for having us.
So we got you out here on this rainy, nasty day. Talk a little bit about some dirt racing.
Talk about racing.
Yeah.
How about that?
So let's hear the story on how you got started.
My story's probably not as glamorous as some of the ones that have gone before me, but in 2010, the Hornet class started making its way this way. 2009, they actually had an enduro race over at Brownstown, and I thought, man, that would be so fun to get in one of those little cracker boxes and see what they do. And then in 2010, they started to race here full schedules in 2011, but I was actually at the racetrack with Jake Byers one night, and I told him early in the night, I said, man, I'd like to buy one of those. He said, well, I'll work on that for you. And if you know Jake, there's never a dull moment around Jake.
I do know Jake.
Yeah, so Jake disappears out into the crowd, and he comes back right before he loads up to get in the car for his feature. And he said, I bought you a car. I said, you did? And he goes, yeah, I did. And I said, which one is it? He turns around, and we're at Bloomington. He looks around, and he's like, it's that blue one right there that just flipped on the front stretch. So we got Terry Tate from Bloomington Speedway to haul it home on the hook. I lived down on Church Lane at the time there, just down from Bloomington Speedway. And he backed it in that night. We sideswiped my wife's van, backing it in the garage. Oh, yeah,
okay.
Yeah. So that was my first experience with owning a race car. It started out with a story, and we've made a million memories since then. So.
Sounds like it.
But growing up watching my older brother race, I always thought it'd be neat to try. Always been an avid dirt track racing fan, and then was lucky enough to find myself kind of pursuing this thing in the Hornet class as it's all evolved, and it just kind of went from there.
Nice.
So
you guys have pretty well stuck to the Hornet class over the years.
We have. I actually had an opportunity to move up a few years ago. My brother had a really nice super stock that was one that Kevin Arthur had won several track championships at Bloomington in. And he asked, do you want to move up? And I said, let's wait one more season, because we were chasing national points. And then that following season, we actually we finished runner-up in the UMP East region.
Nice.
I think there was 3 points that separated Bubba Gibson and I, and he is just a heck of a racer. So, to finish that close to Bubba Gibson and be on the national stage with guys like Jeremy Reed, Adam Webb, Bubba Gibson, some of those guys, it was pretty cool to find myself over there. We placed second in the East region and fifth in the national points. And then the following season, I think we got 12th in the East region and 9th in national points. So, we were pretty lucky to be competitive there those 2 years, and then with the kids growing up and getting busy with kids, that kind of took me out of the mix for a couple years. But this year, we're hoping for some big things, and I've been working some on the promoter side the last 2 years with a charity race that I sponsor and head up. So that takes quite a bit of time and energy. I know people are always quick to judge promoters, and my Lord, if you've ever promoted a race, even if it's a 20-lap special event,
right?
Hats off to the promoters, each and every one. Jim Price, Tim Keithley. You've got Joe and Jill Spiker that have taken on now Perrigan, Lincoln Park, and Bloomington.
That's right.
Guys like Levi Perkins that head up Harf, and
that's right.
And some of these guys that are the unsung heroes of what we do and we enjoy. These guys don't get the credit that they deserve.
You're absolutely right. There's no doubt about it. They put their necks on the line each and every weekend and working their tails off all through the week, trying to give everybody the best track they can.
Absolutely. If you've ever tried to get a hold of Tim Keithley, good Lord, that guy, not enough can be said for that man and what he does for dirt track racing as a whole. One that I did miss that I want to make sure I give recognition to is Steve Leonard from down at Salem, Little Salem, there at Thunder Valley. Those folks are absolutely awesome. We took our kids this past summer. My middle son and my stepson had asked if they could go turn some laps, and I thought, well, let's see what they've got. So I took them over middle of the week, and we were going to rent the track there at North Vernon, and it rained us out, and I was like, crap, what are we going to do now? And so I called Steve Leonard at like 5:30 on a Tuesday evening. I said, I know this is a long shot, but do you have any time open on the track? He's like, you know what, come on down. So we loaded up at North Vernon and hauled tail down to Little Salem, and he opened up Thunder Valley for us and let the kids turn some laps. And with that, hopefully some future stars were born, because my 12-year-old has now decided he's taking over the helm of one of the race cars this year. So he's going to actually be driving one of our house cars this year, some part-time. So we'll see how that works. If if all goes well, maybe Dad can hand the wheel over to him, and I can just go back to promoting and wrenching now.
There you go.
But
well, that's exciting. 12 years old, that's a great age to get them involved and get them behind the wheel. They'll pick up so much at that age. And
well, you look at the guys like Jeff Bland Jr., Bradley Sterrett, Chad Combs, some of these guys that grew up and started. I know Bradley drove my car one night, and he even said in his post-race interview, he said, I had go-karts to start out with when I was a kid. He said that's where I started out.
Right.
They didn't have the Hornet class, so now the Hornet class is kind of in my opinion, a safer way to get your kid out there. Even though the cars might be moving a little faster, their head's not poked up out past the seat, and there's some bars around them. You got a little protection around you. But that's just me as a paranoid father thinking that I'd rather have my kid in a Hobbs chassis as no chassis. So thanks to Lee Hobbs, there's your plug, buddy, for keeping me safe. Out of all the cars that I've had built, it's my Hobbs chassis car that I've just. Yeah. It's part of the family at this point. That's the one we took to the national stage. It's the one we won the track championship at Perrigan and Bloomington both in. So pretty awesome to have one of Lee's cars. I watched Lee as a kid, and you can't say enough about Lee Hobbs. I mean, if it could be done on four wheels, he's done it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and he's always willing to help others out, whether you're running a Hobbs chassis or not. He'll give his advice or make a part or make a repair. Yep. Yeah, Lee's a nice guy. We had him on the show, and it was nice to hear his story, how he got his start. I've known him all my life, but never really sit down and talk to him for an hour and just get the whole story. But
it's amazing when you talk to some of these people how far back racing really goes. It's like an infectious disease. Once someone in the family's been bit by the bug, it kind of carries on. I was thinking on the way down here, you don't think of dirt track racing without, a Stephen Godsey, a Ray Godsey, a Levi Godsey. I mean, there's been a Godsey in racing for as long as I can remember. I mean, I can remember hearing my brother talk as a kid, and he's like, all the time, man, that Godsey's fast. That Godsey's fast. And so, I mean, the Kinzers and the Barrows and those names that have kept this sport alive around here for so many years. I mean, it's interesting to hear their stories.
It is. There's a lot of history right around us, and you're right. I mean, the big names that you hear, it's always cool to look back and see how far back it goes.
Absolutely.
It's really interesting. So the 12-year-old's going to get some seat time.
He is.
And who will be piloting the other car? Will it be yourself? Or
I'm actually going to be driving the car that we had as the house car last year for the St. Jude's Children's Hospital race, the Prelude to the Scream that I promote. I built that car last year with the intention of making it last year's flagship car for the race. Build it out of pocket. As you know, everything that's generated for that race goes back to that race.
That's right.
So I built this car just kind of as another house car, basically as a backup car, because I could read the writing on the wall. The kids were getting older, and there was becoming more and more interest in it. And so I built that car with the intention of going ahead and switching it over to fit my wants and needs. I'm short, so so it never fails. I have to move the seat up and do some adjusting in the cockpit to make it fit me and get my personal seat in it. But I'll be driving that car.
Nice.
And then Kale, my middle son, he'll be driving the green 85 this year. So hopefully everyone sees this and realizes it's not me in the car. Please don't hurt him.
Now you never know. He might go out there and
he'll probably go beat Dad, because I'm getting old and slow. So
that will happen.
All these gray hairs in the beard tell a story, man. So.
So let's hear how the Prelude come together. I mean, that's such a great benefit that you guys have put together, and just to hear the whole story.
Strictly by accident, man. Yeah. It just truly was one of those lunkhead statements that I'll never, ever, ever regret making. You can't always say that in life, that you made a statement that had such a profound impact with what goes on with this race. I mean, it was unbelievable, but the way it all evolved was, as I was telling you, I was actually at Rogers Group, and I was sitting on the scales one morning waiting to get loaded on some stone. And I was in the dump truck, bored, hot, and I'm scrolling through Facebook, and I get to Bloomington Speedway's page, and there were so many people that were trash talking the Hornet class. And I thought, you know what? that is offensive to me in one sense because of the fact that I pay the same $30 to go turn laps on that track as some of your bigger names, yourself in a modified. You pay the same admission fee that I do.
That's correct.
So I thought we really don't want any special recognition, but how about some equality? So I threw out kind of a jab at people. It's like, hey, you know what? I've got a national title contending car and the Paragon Track Championship car here that's going to win the track championship here in just a few weeks. Why don't we do something positive with this? So I'll take these 2 cars that you guys know are fast cars, that are safe cars you see run up front every week.
Right.
You pick 2 of your best drivers from the upper classes of racing. We'll stick them in these cars, but the deal is they can never have driven a Hornet before.
Right.
And the other stipulation is if they win and whatever they win, we donate to St. Jude's Children's Hospital. Made on a public comment on a public post on Facebook. And within just a couple hours, we had 200 and some likes. And at that time, Matt Hamilton was the track manager, and Mike O'Leary was promotions director there at Bloomington Speedway. And Matt reached out to me, and he's like, look, he goes, no pun intended here. He goes, but you've kicked a hornet's nest. He goes, you have kicked something off that could be really big.
Right.
And so we kind of talked about it for a few days there and beat the idea around of, let's see how many cars we can get involved. So within, I think it was 5 days, we had filled an 18-car field, and these guys were generously donating their cars for the night and allowing drivers from the upper classes to race in a Hornet for the night. And, we had guys like Stevie Hawkins, Bradley Sterrett, Derek Groomer, Chad Combs, Anton Hernandez, Steve Peden. I mean, we had some of the best around that we have to offer in the upper class of racing. Jake Scott, Josh Cunningham. I mean, those guys are awesome open wheel racers, and they hopped in the Cosman cars. We had Buddy Cunningham in one of the cars, Rowdy Rod Richardson, if you remember the Back Road to Indy podcast that used to go around.
Right.
We had Rowdy Rod in full costume that night that was driving a car. So, I mean, we made it fun for the fans. We made it fun for the drivers. We made it fun for the owners. And at the end of the night, the most important thing was that we all came together, which you don't see and haven't heard of any other class doing. Since then or before then, none of your sanctioning classes have done anything like we managed to do, which was set up a children's benefit race that 100% of the proceeds, when you make your checks, you don't make them to Chad, you don't make them to Levi, you don't make them to Prelude to the Scream, you make them to St. Jude's Children's Hospital, and it goes directly to St. Jude's Children's Hospital. That way no one can ever say anything about mixing or commingling funds. It keeps everybody honest, and we run a checks and balances with that with the track. And we actually have a St. Jude's representative, Stephanie Dillon. She's kind of my liaison between myself and St. Jude's.
Nice.
She helps me get the website up and running. She does the Partners in Hope and all of that. So, I mean, with all of that controversy based around the Hornets, we turned that into what is now passionately referred to as the Prelude to the Scream, or the Heroes and Hornets race. And if you look it up on Facebook, it's Prelude to a Scream. A lot of people ask how we came up with that name, and it's because the first race was actually held Friday, July the 13th at Bloomington Speedway. And I told Matt Hamilton, I said, that every one of those guys, after driving their own equipment, is going to be screaming at the top of their lungs when they go into turn 1, not knowing what to expect at the exit of turn 2. So we called it Prelude to a Scream, just joking, but it stuck. And kind of the subtitle on it was the Heroes and Hornets, because here's the deal. Anybody that gets involved with this race, whether you donate $1 to vote your favorite driver towards the front, or you donate $1,000 to be a corporate sponsor in this deal, you're a hero.
Right.
And the format for the race was actually Rick Evans' idea from 105.1 Hoosier Country. I always make sure that just to keep everything on the up and on top of the table where everybody can see it, we always make our donations at 105.1 there at the radio station. That way, that's just one more point of accountability for us. That way people can see, okay, this is where my money truly went.
Yeah.
When we announced the night of the race that, we raised $14,000, we didn't, go and hand them a check for $12,000 because we reimbursed ourselves for something. Every penny of this truly was donated to them. And anything from T-shirts, I know Trent Nicholas, he donated his time on the artwork on the T-shirts. Jeff Van Horn donated all the stickers and the decals and the lettering for the car last year. Kleindorfer's Hardware has donated fasteners, hardware, rivets, and the list goes on. Jeff and Paul at Extreme Performance donated, belts for the car. Tony Walker at Nemesis donated a couple sheets of aluminum for the car. I mean, it's just those little things that
it all adds
yeah,
up.
it all adds up. And then here's the thing, you know, at the end of this, in 2 years' time, we've raised almost $40,000 for St. Jude's, which is
just absolutely awesome.
That's a sense of accomplishment and a sense of pride that you look back on. And you know, I want to make sure everyone understands that is not me. All I was the mouthpiece and the idea.
Right.
It's everybody else that got involved that's made this thing such a huge success.
Yeah, well, that's a great story. I mean, I had no idea how it come together, but I was you know, curious and wanted to make sure and at least myself find out.
Right.
It's great to see what you guys have been able to overcome. As far as it's a lot to put together.
It is.
And to have everyone involved.
The first race that we planned, we had 4 weeks.
Yeah.
And in those 4 weeks, we had to deal with advertising, promoting the race. We had to deal with getting the purse structure organized. We had to deal with entering the drivers. We had, you know, I mean, there was so much
in a very short amount of time.
In a very short amount of time. And I had asked Matt Hamilton, I said, you know, what do you think we can set as a goal? Because I don't ever want to go into something without a challenge.
Realistic, but also
I didn't want to overshoot the mark, but at the same time, I didn't want to fall short and say, oh, well, we can raise $3,000 when we could have raised $6,000.
Right.
You know, so I put a challenge out. You know, Matt Hamilton said that they had passed the Reilly Bucket for 2 or 3 weeks, and they had raised a certain amount of money. And I said, well, I want to raise $10,000. He kind of raises his head and he looks at me and he says, okay. I said, I'll bet you lunch on it. And he kind of laughed at me. He says, no, I know you're pretty headstrong. He goes, let's see how close you get. Well, the shock was just unbelievable the night that we got to the end and was like, you know, you've raised $14,000. And, you know, that was breathtaking. That whole night, the first night, you know, I can't express to you, you know, I've won at Bloomington, I've won at Montpelier, I've won at Perrigan, you know, other tracks, and no win nothing.
Yeah.
You know, I honestly, it was pretty moving for me the night I won Bloomington, because Bloomington's tough to win at. I mean, you know, if you can go to Bloomington and run the top 5, you can go anywhere in the nation and run and be competitive on any given night. So to win at Bloomington and to, you know, to eke out a near track championship there with just a few points separating Jeremy Smith and I, and Gregory Garrison and I another year, just a few points between us, you know, it was pretty awesome.
Right.
To hold that Prelude race there on my home track where I had grown up watching so many of my heroes run, and then to, you know, couple that with the cause and the whole meaning behind the race, but then to have somebody as humble and as talented as Bradley Sterrett drive my car from 10th to 1st that night and win it. I can't lie at all. Bradley had me in tears that night.
Right.
I mean, it was just really emotional that night. You know, it was a blast seeing it all happen. But at the same time, there wasn't a butt left in the seat when that race went green. Even Mike O'Leary commented to me. Someone had taken a picture and posted it on Facebook, and it was from the racing side, from the pit side of Bloomington Speedway, and all you could see was just the hill lined with people standing.
Is that right?
And I mean, it was just awesome to see that and to be a part of something like that.
Yeah.
And when it all came down, Matt was like, you know, I want you to be in the infield when this all happens. He said, I want you to be down there and see how this all transpired and what you've had a part in. And I don't know if you've ever got the chance to stand in the infield and watch a race at Bloomington Speedway, but you'll get two things. You'll get emotional and you'll get motion sickness.
Right.
Because you're just like this the whole time, you know. Yeah. But it was awesome to see it, you know. So we're looking forward to it again this year. We've actually got it on the schedule this year again for Twin Cities Raceway Park. Tim Keithley's been kind enough to have us back this year. He hosted us last year with the current changes at Bloomington Speedway and everything. You know, I reached out to the Spikers, and it just wasn't in the cards to have it there this year. So Tim opened up his doors again this year. We're going to do it over at Twin Cities again. And like I said, I mean, you know, it doesn't get much better or more classy than Tim Keithley. I mean, he is a phenomenal individual, both on and off the track. And as a promoter, he's top flight. I mean, absolute top shelf kind of guy. He and his wife are super. His staff is super. You know, the racers over there are a great group of people. You know, I really enjoy every time we get to go to Twin Cities. It's always a good time.
Right. It's a nice facility. They've put a lot of time and money in it and work their tails off, just like all these promoters. Just like you were saying earlier, none of them get enough credit.
Right.
Because, you know, if it wasn't for the fans, us drivers wouldn't be able to race, and if it wasn't for the promoters, we wouldn't be able to race. So you take either one of those out of the picture. you got a bunch of people with a lot of cars with nothing to do with them.
Right.
So, yeah, that's great. So do you guys have the date locked down for the
August the 29th.
August the
29th at Twin Cities Raceway Park. We'll be doing the Prelude to the Scream round 3.
Nice.
We will actually, you hear it here first on the Blue Chip Show. You're going to hear that we are opening up the field this year. The idea is for guys to have never driven a Hornet before to be able to have the opportunity to race one of these cars, but we're actually going to open this up to 2 different segments here. We're going to actually allow 4 drivers that were fan favorites voted in from either of the first 2 Prelude races.
Okay.
So you guys can pick 4 drivers that were in the former Prelude race, and we're going to vote them in. The person with the most likes or the most comments or the most honorable mentions will be the 4 that we vote back in. And then we're going to also do 5 of the crowd favorite of guys that either have or haven't raced a Hornet before.
Okay.
I know a lot of people have been really adamant about the fact they want to see Luke Bland back in the car. And I know if you know Luke at all, I mean, he is definitely a heck of a driver.
Yeah.
And he absolutely was dominant when he raced a Hornet. I always hated to see the 100 car unload because it was just kind of like a sinking feeling when that car came out of the trailer. You knew he was there to race.
Yeah,
so,
right.
So we've opened it up for that. So,
Nice.
we're going to try to mix it up a little bit this year. We want to try to keep it new and fresh and exciting and try to keep this thing going on because, I mean, it's my intention when this started was honestly, let's do this year and see how it goes. But
Right.
I can't ever see this race going away.
Right.
I really can't. I would hope that if something should happen to me that my kids would carry it on or someone would carry this on or something
Right.
like it because, honestly, it's pretty moving when you think about the fact that the whole reason that we have a St. Jude's Children's Hospital is because there are kids that are so misfortunate that they end up with a terrible disease and their families are left to try to pick the pieces up and whatnot. And, when a kid's treated at St. Jude's, the parents pay for nothing.
Right.
They go there, they are a guest of St. Jude's, and there's no bill. There's no bill that follows them home. And now they've started their global initiative to where they're actually reaching out across the world. It's no longer just in the United States that St. Jude's working on, the children's research with cancer or the diagnoses of or the treating of, but now they're going worldwide. So, it's been said that Danny Thomas, the founder of St. Jude's, always said that he would rather 1 million people give $1 than one person give 1 million.
Yeah.
And that's because that's 1 million different places
That's right.
that dollar came from, that the word's being spread. So,
Right.
I mean, I encourage everyone to get involved. I mean, we didn't start this evening to be a plug for St. Jude's or this race, but at the
Right.
same time, we want to make people aware that this is definitely a very real need and a very live and active charity that we're working on. And again, I mean, everything goes 100% to St. Jude's. You'll
Right.
make your payments directly to St. Jude's.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's all really great to hear that you guys have already got it figured out as far as the schedule. It gives everyone a chance to get their votes in.
We could put a Levi Godsey in one too.
Boys, I don't know. I don't know if I can handle it.
See, I mean, you never know till you try it. You never
Right,
know till you try it. I
right.
promise that modified on its worst night never pushed as bad as one of these cars. I promise.
I'd say you're probably right.
Yeah.
Well, it'll be interesting to see who all the fans vote for, and
Absolutely.
to see where that goes, and hopefully, we can raise more than the
Absolutely.
amount last year. I believe it came in at 22,000.
Yep,
Is that correct?
Right at 22,000 was the grand total.
That's great, and hopefully we can shoot for 30. you know?
Yeah, I like the way you think. I like the way you think. I bit my lip and didn't want to say 30 this year because we had, at the end of the race last year, we were looming at like the 19,000 and some odd dollars,
Right.
and I won't mention his name, but a gentleman that is just a class act.
Yeah.
He came to me after everything was all said and done. It was about 3 or 4 days after, and he said, "How close are you to your goal?" And I told him, I said, "We're really close." I said, "We're X amount of dollars away." And he said,
Yeah.
"I'll make up the difference."
Nice.
So, I mean, it's because of people like that take
That's
a chance and that take a leap of faith. I mean, every little bit counts. So.
That's right. Okay, well, definitely look forward to that event. Hopefully we can make it over and watch. That'd be really cool. I'm not sure what else they got on the schedule that night, but we'll have
I
to...
believe they've got, if I'm not mistaken, it'll be the wing sprints that night and
Yeah.
maybe the minis.
Nice.
I'm pretty sure. Usually always modifieds there that night. So.
Right. Shouldn't be any reason why we won't be there.
Yeah, it should be modifieds there that night.
So what was the first racetrack that you ever actually raced on? Was Bloomington the first
Speedway.
one?
Yeah,
Nice.
Bloomington Speedway. They threw me right to the wolves.
Yeah.
Right to the wolves. And of course, that's back when you could pretty much knock the windows out, stuff a cage in it, and be competitive. And Lord, I didn't have a clue.
Yeah.
I didn't know. I knew green meant go and red meant stop, and the black flag was you were a jerk and needed to pull off the track.
Right.
And, so I mean, I knew the basics of it, but. Like I said, the very first one was a little Dodge Neon that was, it was like riding a pack of chewing gum around the track, but it was fun, and the bug bit. I ended up then moving to a Beretta, and ran it for a little while, and then ended up getting rid of it and going back to a Neon that was built by Ryan Tusing. I don't know, everyone knows Ryan from the Wing Sprint division. I mean, he is a phenomenal driver, and that guy is an amazing engineer and mechanic. So that car pretty much drove itself, had a ball with that car. And then the Cavaliers started kind of migrating their way from Illinois. Some of the Adam Webb and Jeremy Reed cars started coming over. And Gregory Garrison brought over the first Cavalier that was just uber crazy fast, which was one that Jeremy Smith had built. So we had to step our game up to try to remain competitive. So we built a Cavalier, and that's pretty much been what I've stayed with ever since.
Yeah.
So
you guys have raced Paragon, Brownstown, Bloomington, Twin Cities, and then you've traveled out of state for some of the bigger shows.
I went to Molarville, Ohio was the one out of state that I went to. That's a big, fast track. Man, it's big and fast. But primarily, most of my racing has been done right here in Indiana.
Yeah.
There's a track up north that I absolutely love that I've got unfinished business with.
Yeah.
If they do open back up this year, I've got some unfinished business at Boswell we're going to take care of. I went up and won the heat race by half a track over a rear-wheel drive Porsche. And this guy was like the golden boy of Kokomo Speedway and Kankakee. And so we dethroned him that night. And they rained out as we were sitting in the lineup chute to go out for the feature. And I was like, doggone it, man.
Yeah.
And, I'm one of those racers that I'm as deaf as a board when it comes to hearing something while you're standing and talking to me. But you let there be a vibration in my car or something off, and I'll feel it.
Yeah.
And I told my crew chief, Larry Babs, which has been with me since the very beginning, I said, man, I feel something knocking. I feel it in my butt. And he's like, what? And I said, I feel a solid knock in this motor. I said, I can feel it in my butt in the seat. And he shook his head. He goes, run it. And he's like, we're here. We're 4.5 hours away from home. Run it. Jump it. Whatever. Let's do it.
Right.
So we go out, and I led the feature down to like 4 to go, and it grenaded on the backstretch. And I was just sick.
Yeah.
I mean, I had it by, a quarter of a track. And I mean, some of the guys that I race with around here locally were there that night, and they were like, my Lord, you were on a mission.
Right.
And so we went back the following week, and, we had a bone stock motor in it, finished second. But after having that taste of being so close, I was like, we will be back.
Yeah.
We will be back. We've got some unfinished business there, but I always love running Boswell. Kokomo's another favorite of mine.
Yeah. Kokomo's fun.
Oh, God, Kokomo's a blast. Gregory Garrison schooled me in stellar fashion up there. He told me, he's like, you're not running high enough. You've got to run the wall at Kokomo. I'm like, dude, you couldn't slip a piece of paper between me and the wall. He looked at me like I was just crazy, and I'm like, see what you can do.
Yeah.
He did. We come off of turn 2, and I hear something on the outside, and I thought, surely that idiot's not passing me. And I look up, and he's already 3/4 of the way by me. I was like, all right, that's it. I'm going to the really top side now. So from then on, he made the joke, if you're not grinding paint off the heads of your rivets, you're not racing Kokomo. So
there you go.
I had to go out and streak the wall a few times to get comfortable, but it's true. When you're running the best at Kokomo, you're beating the wall down in turn 2 on the exit.
Right.
And that's when it's fun. I mean, that's when it's fun. So, even in the Hornet class,
right.
you guys that haven't ever raced it don't really know, but I mean, those cars are on the ragged edge of out of control when you see them going as fast as we are. And
right.
I mean, to manhandle them and muscle them around there, and race with guys like Gregory Garrison, Owen Cosman,
right.
Greg O'Neill, Donnie Modesty, Andy Anderson, some of these guys that race all the time. I mean, these are some top-notch drivers.
Right.
You know, these guys are really good. And the thing of it is, you know, people take for granted that even though they look like something that you go and get groceries in Monday through Friday, there's a lot of time spent on these cars and a lot of money spent on these cars. And there's a lot of trial and error in these cars, you know. I mean, trying to figure out the right spring combination with your struts and the right tire to run for gearing and the right air pressure for the track condition. And it gets down to the point to where if people really knew the science of what goes in behind these cars, there's no different than any other car. I mean, if you're going to get optimal performance out of it, you're going to have to put in the maximum amount of effort to see what it takes to squeeze every little bit out.
That's right.
You know, and we've got guys like Luke Bland that we're fortunate enough to have here locally that does a lot of our ECM tuning and performance parts production that he does for the Ecotechs. That makes it easiest to have parts on demand. He also does dyno testing. So, I mean, you know, Soggy Bottom Performance has been there with me, SBR Performance, since the very beginning. Luke's used me and a few other guys as guinea pigs on this stuff, and he's really, really advanced the curve on what we do with these cars.
Yeah.
So.
Well, not only have you guys gotten quicker, but you guys have gotten safer.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that I've noticed.
Yeah.
Is just how much, you know, it seems like everyone has paid a lot more attention to the safety of them.
Right.
I know last summer, I think it was possibly around Fun Fest, I think there was a pretty bad accident over at Brownstown in that division.
Yeah.
Tore down the fence, I believe,
Yep.
if I'm thinking right. But, you know, fortunately, the driver was okay.
I want to say it was one of the Caudell boys.
You know, I don't recall who it was.
I can see the car. It was a black and red 23. I know exactly when it happened. Donnie Modesty took a wild ride, too. And if you know Donnie, Donnie's a pretty good-sized feller. I mean, he's not a little guy.
Yeah.
And he took a nasty ride in turn one. He went into turn one at Brownstown, and as soon as the car started to set and roll over on the right side, it broke the right rear off. And that's one of the things that you and I were talking about before we went on air is that, you know, there's a definite high demand for a safety hub on the right rear of these cars. And I think a lot of tracks have actually started to mandate that they have that safety hub.
Yeah, that's good.
I mean, by all means, if you're building a front-wheel drive car, take the time to put the safety hub on the rear. If you don't know what that is, get a hold of Levi here at Blue Chip Racing Technologies, and he can steer you in the right way. It's a must. I mean, by all means, that is the weak link of these cars.
Yeah.
And, you know, you're right. When the Hornets first started, it was you could get by with an old well pipe cage because we were running 50, 55 mile an hour around Bloomington Speedway. Now you're running in excess of 70, 75 mile an hour at Bloomington, Paragon, Brownstown. I mean, you're cooking, you know, and you're literally in a grocery getter.
Right.
And the object is to get these cars as light because there's no weight rule on them anymore. So you get them as light as you possibly can. So that means you cut as much of the structure out as you can to still make it sound. Mm-hmm. And when you do that, you compromise the integrity of that car, you know. So spare no expense on safety. I mean, by all means. When I took my very first Cavalier, I took it to Greg Amick of Black Widow Chassis.
Yeah.
And I told Greg, I said, just make it fast. And he looked at me like I was absolutely dumber than a rock. He's like, the cage will make you safe. He's like, you'll be fast because you're safe. He said, you'll be comfortable, and if you're comfortable, you'll be fast.
Right.
And so I learned early on that, you know, there's no second guessing, you know, the expense of safety.
Right.
In moving forward and putting Kale in the car this year, I've had to bite the bullet and buy the Hans and the helmet and the fire suit, and I mean it's expensive to get started. But I mean it's definitely, you know, I look at it this way: what price would you put on your life?
Right.
You know, how much are you willing to spend on a helmet versus, you know, the alternative of not coming home at the end of a crash.
Right.
So, you know, accidents happen, and we never want to see it happen. But if we can do something on our end to prevent it, then that's what we want to do.
Exactly.
And all of the promoters have jumped on with this too. I mean, they're very, very, very adamant about, you know, for instance, they've now mandated that we have to have the down bar in the window area. They've mandated that we have to have a halo in the top of the car now, so we can get it in the top of the car. You know, my personal cage, Lee went above and beyond on it.
Yeah.
And we worked together when we were designing the cage in the car. He said, you know, I did a few extra things, but, you know, those few extra things are where it makes a difference of me crowding 6 inches higher on the cushion versus holding it right where it was at, you know?
Right.
You got a different kind of comfort level in that car.
Absolutely.
And you know you're safe.
Right.
So.
Well, and like you said, Lee, he always does a heck of a job. And, I mean, anyone that knows Lee, he's been doing it for quite a while.
Absolutely.
So get a hold of Lee for all your cage and safety needs. And I believe Brandon Norman, is that his name?
Yep.
I believe he does a
phenomenal job too. I actually had a Howler car for a while. We affectionately named that car Jezebel because we never.
His last name is Norman, correct?
Yeah, Brandon Norman. He's from over around just on the other side of Columbus. He's halfway between Columbus and North Vernon there.
I thought so.
Yeah, Howler Fabrications. He does a phenomenal job on his cages. A friend of mine does the runoff races and races for Mini Cooper, and I hooked he and Brandon up, and he's actually got guys that's bringing cars to Brandon from all over the United States now.
Nice.
The Howler cage was awesome. I mean, absolutely beautiful
From
cage.
what I watch on Facebook, it looks like he does a great job.
Yeah.
And, that's the two guys that come to my mind on the Hornet cages. And, And, I know they both do a lot of other chassis and cages. So
Well, and there's guys that will, and I'm not knocking this, so I hope no one's offended by this, but you can order cages off
Cage Kit.
Yeah, cagekit.com or racingcages.com. And, that's all fine and well, but I've welded for years, but I don't know that I would trust myself to weld a cage in a car where if you were going to go out and flip it down the front stretch 80 miles an hour and someone slam into it, that I would trust my welds over, someone like Lee or Brandon. You know what I mean? So an ounce of prevention's worth a pound of cure, they say. So I'd just rather trust the professionals and let those guys, I mean, let's be honest, for, peanuts on the dollar of what it's going to cost for medical bills, it's worth the investment if you're going to race.
Right.
Do it right.
That's
Do
right.
it right.
So, Chad, who all helps you guys out on the cars? Is it just you and the boys, or?
I mentioned his name earlier, but people think I talk in the third person when I talk about Wayno. But Larry Babs is actually who Wayno is. So now the cat's out of the bag. You heard it here first. Wayno is not my imaginary friend. It's Larry Wayne Wayno. We just refer to him affectionately as Wayno.
All right.
But Larry Babs has been there with me from the start. He stuck with me through the lean times, and he's been there with me when we were actually having fun and able to pull in, holding our heads up. So,
nice.
He and his wife have been great. My kids have been awesome to support me. I've got Mike Root with Quality Certified Transmission Specialties out of Bloomington, Indiana, that he builds all my transmissions. Travis Kern Racing Engines, Terry Cummins Machine Shop does all of our machine work. As I said, Luke Bland with SBR Performance, he's been absolutely phenomenal to work with, both personally and on the race car. Luke is just a heck of a good guy, heck of a friend.
Yeah.
We've had Bloomington Auto Color out of Bloomington, Indiana, Hank Ellis, Henry Ellis. He's the one that helped me come up with that wild green that everybody either loves or hates.
Right.
And Kleindorfer Hardware, they've been excellent to sponsor the Prelude race, so I want to make sure that they get their recognition. Kenny Bryan at Heritage Floors, he came on last year with the Prelude race. He's actually going to be on the race car again this year. I'm going to go ahead and leave the people that sponsored the race last year on the car this year, so they get notable mention. So
there you go.
So when you see the St. Jude's Children's Hospital car run out, it's really weird for me to be in any other car than the 85.
Yeah.
I took the 85 number because that was my brother's number when he was racing.
Okay.
And for the first year and a half that I raced, I ran the 42 because that was almost half of 85.
Right.
And so I, just out of superstition one night, I told my brother jokingly, I was like, I'm going to change the number of this pig to the 85. He said, well, you're only going to do that if you promise you're going to win.
There you go.
I'm like, well, you suck. I didn't. So I changed it to the 85, and lo and behold, I won at Bloomington that next night. I was like, holy crap, there's something to this.
Right.
And we absolutely went on a tear in 2016. We won 7 races that year and had some really good fun with the car. So it's just always been the 85. But we changed the St. Jude's car to number 62 because 62 is the year that Danny Thomas founded St. Jude's.
Is that right? Okay.
So this year I'll be driving the red 62 St. Jude's car.
There you go.
So I'm in a red car, which is totally unlike anything I've ever driven before. I'm in a car that's not the 85. So I'm going against all the luck and superstition that you could possibly go against. But we're looking for some excitement this year.
That's really cool. especially the 62,
Right.
being the year he founded that.
Well, a lot of people didn't know. They're like, "Where'd you come up with the 62 at?" And so
Yeah.
I try to give people the backstory.
That's right.
That you know, everything surrounded around that car is synonymous with St. Jude's.
Right.
Some nights I have to remember that pulling off the track, that
Right.
I have to keep my mouth shut, that I'm representing a children's foundation, and it kind of helps keep me in check some nights.
Right.
But you know, you never want to go to the track and show yourself or have a bad night. But some nights, you know, it's hot
Yeah.
and everybody gets frustrated. But you know, it hopefully we can carry that and carry that banner with dignity and pride. So
Yeah. I'm sure you'll do just a fine job. We've definitely enjoyed, you know, looking. I was flipping through your Facebook, and, you know, it was pretty cool just to see what all you guys have accomplished.
Right.
And, you know, looking back over all the years of racing, all the wins you have, and, I mean, you've really done a lot in 10 years, or 9, I guess. 2010's when you started.
2010, I actually set
So,
out 2 seasons.
2 seasons out. So
Yeah.
you got 7 years
Right.
actually under your belt. What would you have to say is your most memorable race? You know, as far as a big win or.
You know, Bloomington, the night I got my first win was actually a double feature night. We had 2 features that night. We had a makeup feature and we had the scheduled feature. And you talk about Hornet racing around Southern Indiana, you will definitely quickly hear the name Burton and Mayer come up. Daryl Burton and John Mayer were, I mean, they were like the Days of Thunder, the Ricky Bobby, you know,
Right.
the whole mix. I mean,
Right.
those guys are just, they're poetry in motion when they're together. And Buckwheat and I have raced together for years, and since the very start. And to race against John Mayer and finally race against him and pull off the win, that was something that was just absolutely awesome, you know.
Right.
And oddly enough, one of the first people that had their sweaty head in the car with me was Big Daryl hugging me.
Yeah.
He's like, "You finally did it. You finally did it." You know, I mean, those guys were just as excited for me as if they would have won themselves. And I mean, that's where memories and friendships are made.
That's right.
You know, it's easy to get tangled up with a guy or bump him on the start or go into the corner and get into him and he thinks you door checked him and they hold a grudge and they want to retaliate. And man, it's so much better if you can just shake it off,
Right.
laugh about it, shake hands, move on, and the next time you hit the track, it's all behind you.
Right.
You know, you're there for that race, not what happened before. You know, obviously, there's times that we all have driven in over our head. I remember.
Oh, yeah.
I remember
For sure.
one night I was racing Austin Burton at Bloomington, and you know, heck, the race was over and I'm still digging in turn 1, and he's like, "What the heck is wrong with you?" And I was so into chasing the back of that car that I didn't realize they'd waved
race
the checker.
was already over.
Yeah, the race was over. I was still racing, and Austin's like, "What is your problem?"
Yeah.
I'm like, "Dude, I swear to God," and I know he thought I was lying, but
Yeah.
I mean, I was like the excitable boy out there racing against a 16, 17-year-old kid.
Right.
And it was always fun racing with Austin because he's a lot like his dad. He's super competitive, and I mean, that kid can drive.
Yeah.
Absolutely can drive the wheels off anything he's in.
Right.
So, you know, I've had my lunkhead moments. I have.
Yeah,
I have.
we all have, just like
Yeah.
you said. It happens to the best of us.
Went out for practice at Whitewater one day, and we had raced at Montpelier the night before, and actually won at Montpelier the night before by default. The guy jumped the start on the inside behind me, and so they gave us the win. And everybody was like, "Well, since you won tonight, you ought to go on down to Whitewater." So I had Norm Carpenter with me, little Norm.
Yeah.
And we pile in the truck and we haul down to, I think we stayed in like Portland, Indiana that night in a little hole in the wall motel. And I didn't get much sleep because Norm, he snores like a banshee next to me.
Yeah.
So I'm laying there thinking about how I can't wait to get to the track the next morning. And everybody lied to us because they know if you know me, I'm always late, notoriously late.
Well, you were late today.
I was.
Just let that be known.
Yeah, I was late today, so it's a God-given curse, I swear. But
Yeah.
So everybody had told us that it was 2 hours before time for it to really start. So Norm and I get there and we're like, "Man, these jerks." And so this guy comes rolling out of the woodshed. You know, he's like, "Hey, if you guys want to help iron the track in, you can." So Norm and I look at each other, and at that time I had a 2-car hauler, and we unload our 2 Hornets out of the back. And we go out on the track and, you know, we turn a couple laps and I decide for whatever reason that I'm going to the top. Well, I got up in the marbles and actually knocked the rear end out from underneath, just destroyed the car in practice. And I mean, there was nobody else there. So we took it out in the parking lot and the guy's like, well, I really hate that you pulled this far and you're not going to get to race. And I'm like, what are you talking about not race? I was like, no, I got a welder and log chains, and if you'll let me borrow something to pull on this thing, we'll fix it. And he looks at me like I'm crazy.
Yeah.
Lo and behold, we come out later on, and we bent the rear end back out to where we could weld gussets in it and put it all back together, and I finished second to Jeff Patterson that day.
No kidding.
And Greg Amick drove it in the mechanics race, and not only did Greg win the race, but the back tire won too, because the tire and wheel come off in turn 4.
Is that right?
And he drug it across the finish line on 3 wheels, but the tire and wheel, oh yeah, it was, I mean, you couldn't ask for a better story. But again, that goes back to making memories,
That's
man.
right.
I mean, making memories.
That's what it's all about. That's for sure. So, as far as for 2020 coming up, are you guys just planning on sticking local for the most part? Or is there
I'll
any
probably
big money races you guys are going to chase?
There's really nothing on my radar this year other than I think I'm going to actually try to run the King of Compacts this year. Travis Kearns gave me a pretty good power plant to put in the car, you know, I'd like to take it and see what we can do with it. Obviously, I'd like to see one of my cars back on top at the Prelude this year.
Right.
You know, it was great being able to win the first year's race. It was even better to get to see one of my longtime racing companions, Paul and Misty Cosman, and Owen Cosman's car win the second year. And the guy that drove for them last year, I mean, he is just a phenomenal individual. Eric Parrott from over around Illinois. He's around Sumner, Illinois. He runs a 410 non-wing. He's just a super good guy, class act. You know, when we presented the check to St. Jude's at the radio station, Eric actually took the day off. He's a firefighter over in Illinois. He actually took the day off and came over.
Well, that's pretty cool that you say that. I got to stop you for a second because Bradley is also a firefighter.
I know. So firefighters that like to race,
that's something to keep in mind.
Yeah. I mean, there might be something to that.
Right.
So, and you know, I never thought about that until you just said that.
I'm just sitting here realizing it.
Yeah. So I mean, that is kind of unique. But you know, so we look forward to having, you know, new guys in it. And as I said, we really want the crowd and the fans' participation in jumping on board with this and helping vote the other drivers in from the last 2 years, the crowd favorite or the people pleaser. I'm just going to tell you now, and I told you before we went live that I'd love to see Stevie Hawkins back in it.
Yeah.
I mean, that dude was hauling the mail in the first year. And I'm telling you, I told you that I was in tears when Bradley won it in my car, but I also laughed till I cried almost all the way through it watching Stevie, because, I mean, it was just poetic. He would ramp off of one end and come back on, and then he'd be there a couple laps, and then Stevie'd be gone, and here he is back in the front again. So, I mean, it was neat to watch it all evolve, but, I'd like to see Stevie back in it and a few others. So,
well, being around Stevie, he's flipping hilarious, whether he's at the races or outside the shop. I mean, he cracks me up. So, what would you have to say is the division that you would ever try to get into if you ever left the Hornets?
Oh Lord, I actually I drove a wing car over at Brownstown this past fall.
Yeah,
and I got to tell you, that was awesome. Absolutely awesome. I mean, if I was to move out of the class that I'm in, I would love to end up in the 305s.
Nice.
You know, I didn't realize how much scrubbing speed on the track meant until I got into the Hornets. And if you slide those cars around, you scrub so much speed off. And it's the same way with the wing car. You got to keep it nailed down and keep it rolling, because they just don't have the motor to come back to life coming off the corner that the 410s do. I mean, you don't have that horsepower there. So you've got to keep it free and keep it rolling. And it took me a couple laps to really realize how to handle that car. But then once I started laying down laps, I was like, this thing's all right.
Nice.
You know, I mean, it was definitely one of those that if you like to be a gasser, that car
that's the class to be in. Huh?
Yeah. I mean, I gotta tell you that I just can't ever see myself being able to produce enough pennies to run a modified or a late model. But I love to watch Marty O'Neill and some of those guys in the late models too, because oh my God, they are just absolute animals. Show. Absolutely, always fun to watch those guys. But I would have to say that I'd love to end up eventually in a wing car, but
There you go. Well, Bradley, Starrett, he seems like he really likes it.
Yeah.
And of course, I know anything he drives, he does, he makes it look
Fast.
easy.
Yeah.
And it's, nice to hear people's perspective on the wing class,
Right. Well, and you look at guys like Anton Hernandez, that have come up through the ranks. I mean, he's another one. He started in go-karts. His dad put him in a TQ midget, and then the next thing you know, the guy's winning the Tulsa shootout, and he's here in Indiana, and he drove for Tom and Mike and Vicky Smith at TP Motorsports for a while, and Tom's a friend of my brother's and myself and Mike, and so. We were kind of watching Anton from a distance and seeing what he was doing. Of course, now he's running for the Baldwin brothers in a 410.
Yeah.
These guys that have worked their way up through the ranks, it's amazing. Ethan Barrow's another one. My God, anything he's in, he's fast.
Right.
If you were to see Ethan and I standing beside each other, he's probably 2 foot taller than me.
Yeah,
and
he's pretty tall.
We shoehorned him down into a Hornet, and I'm telling you, it was comical. And I felt so bad because he was having fuel pump issues with the car that night.
Right.
And I was so disappointed that we didn't have a 1-2, but even Ethan was fast, so it was fun to watch all that. But I don't know, man. I would really like to see everyone with a little more unity among the classes. I've stressed that with our division. And people making comments about they should do this or should do that with the track, and asking people to lay off the promoters for a while, just support them in what they're doing.
Right.
Just support them in what they're doing and give them some positive feedback. Show your support. Give them the chance to come to you. Don't be the squeaky wheel. So.
Yeah, it's nice to see Spikers getting new stands put in up at Bloomington Speedway and all the money and time they put into Paragon, and it's. Like you said,
if it can be turned around, Joe and Jill will do it.
Yeah.
There's no doubt in my mind. They run a top-notch facility at Putnamville.
Right.
They get in, they get the show done, and they get out.
Right.
There's none of that lagging around stuff.
Getting home at 2 or 3 in the morning.
That wears
Nobody
a guy
enjoys
out.
that.
Yeah, that wears a guy out quick. That leaves a bad taste in your mouth.
It sure does. Well, do you have any other sponsors that you'd like to give recognition to at the moment? Or?
Actually, let everybody know that Blue Chip has come on as a supporter of the Prelude race this year. They're going to be helping us out with promoting this race. Levi's taking the time to invite me down and walk me through the shop. They've got some amazing things going on here. The facility is absolutely top-notch. Having known Levi and his family for years, I can't stress enough you're in great hands with these guys here. We appreciate the opportunity to come down and look forward to seeing everybody at the track this summer.
Absolutely, and we appreciate you taking the time out of your day to come by the shop and sit down and talk about racing. It's always a good time.
Absolutely.
I'm having a blast doing this.
Right.
It's cool to get everybody's stories.
Well, and that's the thing, and I was thinking about this yesterday. There was a thing that went around about Indiana Dirt Legends. It's a group on Facebook.
Right. I follow it.
And so I was watching it, and one of the guys that I race with every week, Tom Houston, he posted a picture of his car. Well, then there was another picture here just a few days ago that he posted from way back when, and I was thinking, well, shoot, man, it's no wonder he's good. God, he's been racing forever. It's no wonder he's so slick and so smooth,
Yeah.
And guys like PK Pate that had raced for years. Now PK owns a Hornet, and he's got guys that drive for him. Some of these other guys, if you look back to where super stocks in that division are now, when you and I were kids, super stocks looked like the Hornets do now. They weren't front wheel drive.
It's nuts. Yeah.
Yeah.
What all's changed?
Back when Denny Campbell and Lee Hobbs and Greg McCormick and Greg Kendall and those guys were racing in that class, Pertobal and some of them, the Harrises. Jesus, you can't talk about racing without the Harrises. We missed that one earlier.
That's right.
But it's just neat to see it all evolve.
Right.
And with that being said, one thing that I would ask that everyone still continue to remember Roddy Harris.
That's absolutely right.
And keep him in your thoughts and prayers. Hot Rod is definitely one of a kind and a class act, and someone that we all love and admire and respect. So keep him in your thoughts and prayers.
That's right.
So even though our last names and our classes may vary, we're all still racers, and we all still have to care for each other and hold each other up. So
that's right.
Everyone keep him in your thoughts and prayers.
Yeah, we were talking with Bradley, and I think we're going to try to see if if Roddy's up for the trip down and
absolutely
try to get some good stories out of Roddy.
Oh, Lord, he's something else.
Yeah, and like you said, their family being tied to the racing community, it goes back so far. So it'd be really cool to get him on the show.
It's hard to even mention Roddy without almost tearing up. I think the world of him. As a kid, I've shared this story with a few different people. I know Marty O'Neill and I were talking about it one night. But, my dad found out he had pancreatic cancer when I was 10 years old. And I worked for him through the summers at Four Winds down at the marina as a diver and a welder for him. And in the wintertime, obviously, I wasn't doing any diving or any of the underwater repair.
Right.
So in the wintertime, I was young and in high school. I took a job at Marsh, and I'd work there as a stock guy for Marsh. And Roddy was a meat cutter back in the meat department.
Okay.
And you used to have to walk in and go past the office, and the clock-in station was on the back of the office there, but you could look down that aisle and you could always see Roddy. And there was always that big smile and him waving and happy to see you. And he just had an absolute God-given ability to make everyone feel important and to feel special.
He knows no strangers.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
That's one thing I've always said about him.
Yep.
There's no one that's a stranger to Roddy.
And if you're around him for a couple minutes and you were a stranger when you met him, you won't be a stranger for long, because he has a way of making you feel important and engaged and bringing you in and making you feel like part of the team and part of the crew. And guys like that, the world needs more of them.
That's right.
They absolutely do. Guys that'll take their time out to share their experiences and their knowledge, pat you on the back and tell you, hey, that a boy, or when you're wrong, come to you with some dignity and say, hey, I think I'd have handled this a little different, but enough can't be said about Roddy and what kind of guy he is. So again, Roddy, you're in our thoughts and prayers every day.
Absolutely. Well, I think we'll just close her down on that note.
Absolutely.
And this concludes this episode of Off the Track Podcast, where you get the dirt. If you haven't already, be sure and like us on Facebook. You can also check us out on bluechiptech.net, and be sure and tune in next Wednesday for the next episode. If there's anything we can do for anyone out there with your engines, be sure and give us a call at 1-812-807-7050. Thank you and have a good evening.